We good?
Yep.
3, 2, 1. Hello,
we're
Two Fools Walking. So today we're going to do a review of our brand new Mountain Laurel Designs Trailstar, which we've used for the last 16 days.
Yep.
So today is day 16 and the very final day of our GR54 at plus GR549 through hike. So let's just have a little talk about this. So this is a tarp, basically, from Mountain Laurel Designs. It's unique pretty much as far as I know in the sense that it is a perfect two-dimensional pentagon. It's got no cat cuts, but it is made out of a quite high denier, relatively sil nylon. So don't quote me on this. I believe it's a 40 denier sil nylon, which is slightly higher weight than some other sort of manufacturers, but it's pretty tough stuff. It might be a slightly lower denier than that, but it's higher than the fabrics, the deniers that I've used in the past to make tarps out of. So Mountain Laurel Designs are sort of known for their sort of overbuilt products, I would say. You know, they make ultralight gear, but at the same time they really are known for, you know, they don't use 0.05 Cuban unless it's on request sort of thing. You know, they really put a lot of, they make them so that anyone cannot break them.
Yeah, they're built strong. They're built to be, well, not to be abused, but so they can be.
So this shelter weighs, complete with the guy line setup that we use, which is 5 guy lines, and 5 plus the
extra long one,
plus an extra long one.
Oh, and a little drying line.
Plus a little drying line, and the seam ceiling weighs 511 grams, I believe. So it is pretty damn light. And it's, well, how would you say about its comfortability for 2 people?
So, as someone that has never slept in a tent with someone else and never slept in a tarp, I would say it is roomy enough. I think it's sold as a 3-person tent or tarp, but I think 2 people is pretty much the max you're going to get in there, but it sits 2 people really quite comfortably. So we lie normally down the tent next to each other, and there's enough width and enough room. We both can fit a pretty big piece of polychrome. I
would say it's definitely comfortable for 2 people plus gear. 3 people, no way. Maybe if you could suspend the middle without a pole, you could maybe get 3, but it's a 2-person tarp.
Yeah, it's a 2-person tarp.
So that's that. Storm worthiness. So the fabric is really, really strong. The pitching is really easy, so let's actually cut here to the pitching videos. Right, so we're going to go through the sort of basic way that we set the tent up, and we have like 2 different pitches, but we're going to go through like the main, most storm-worthy, most general pitch that we put up most of the time. Before we get on to putting up the tent too hard, we need to talk stakes. So with any non-freestanding tent, really, you need to have pretty good trust in your stakes, I would say. So this tent requires 6 stakes to put up, and it only requires 5 if you're doing the flying diamond pitch, which we're not actually going to demonstrate today. You can probably find in our other videos. So we use MSR groundhogs, which are full, beefy, big stakes. Now I cannot recommend these stakes enough. In the past I've tried other thinner stakes that have broken. I've tried knockoff MSR groundhogs that have bent and snapped. Like, you want to get some good quality stakes. Right, so I actually have a slightly heterogeneous stake here. So I also have one sort of like V-shaped snow stake, which is a spare, and also like a tool stake. So I've marked one of the corners, so this is the back corner. So it's really, really important with this tent, as we either will have or have mentioned already, to pitch it into the wind. So let's pretend it was a windy day and the wind was coming from somewhere over here. What I would do is throw the tent out and pitch the back peg down. So we've got all of these set, all of the 5 guy ropes are cut to the same length. And it's fairly long length of string. It's yay long. About as long as my arm. Exactly how long it is, I cannot remember, unfortunately. But I think I got the measurements roughly off Googling it, so you will be able to find the same. Right. You might want to cut the video, end the video there. Right, so once you've got the back peg laid out, then you want to come and find the front. So the front So all of these things are actually, this thing is completely 5-way symmetrical, it's pentagon. But the next thing you want to do is find the front. Now the only difference is the front has got a long guy rip attached to it, and that's just by my choice. And the front has got a sewn Mountain Norway Designs logo. As I say, it doesn't really matter which one's the front, but I use the one with the logo on it so I know which one it is. So I put that, I line it up, and I say, the wind's coming from over there. Right. Once that's pitched up, you come along, and you go to the side guy peg, side two guy pegs. So the main idea with these is you want to pitch them as if you were pitching a two-dimensional pentagon. And you can kind of see the lines of the seams. You come in, one in there, and one in there. Right, so now we continue. So you want to continue with the concept that you're pitching this as if it was. So up to this point you've been using the concept that it's two-dimensional. Now we have to break that imagination for a second. So for the next two, so these are the two that are going to make the door, you pull it tight, you pull like tension on this corner, then you move the corner inwards about a foot, and then pitch as you would have before. So it's the same except rotated inwards about a foot. Now this tent is particularly, or this tarp is particularly resilient to bad pitching, I would say. So you know, you can pitch over most grounds and it doesn't really matter where you're putting these things, to be perfectly honest. It will sort itself out in general. Okay, once you've got your 5 things pegged out, grab another peg. So you need 2 trekking poles to pitch this tent. Now, on the website, it claims, I believe, that you can do it with a 110 centimeter pole. Mine go up to 140, and I think it pitches best high at about 125 in the center pole. But again, it really depends on how much stormproofing you want to get. So I've just set this to about 120. So this bit helps if you have a partner. They can lift this up for you. And is it rolling, yeah?
Yeah.
Someone can go under and get the center pole in place. Then you whip out. Thank you, Finn. So the door peg, the door pole, again, the higher you make it, the roomier this thing's going to be. This is probably a tad too high though. Right, so that's stage 1 of the pitching complete. Now, if Finley gives you a little view round, you will see it looks pretty damn good, but it's a little bit baggy. So let's come around to here. So the back is clearly not looking great at the moment. So let's start here, crank up the back, that looks a lot better. Crank up the sides. And then crank up these bits. Got to be careful because you can really restrict the height of your door if you're not careful when you're cranking these. So obviously I would have nailed these right in with a rock if I was actually going to pitch this properly, but this is not actually one for us to sleep in tonight. So let's pause that there. Right, so let's just quickly talk about some of the various different features of the tent. So as we've already said, it's 5-way symmetrical. All of the seams are triple stitched, I believe. So it's folded over and then stitched once. It came unsealed. You can probably see my slightly dodgy seam sealing job on it. So this is probably one of the only criticisms I would have. It's got little it's got little tie-outs so you to hang things. So you can see I've tied a string over there. Now, it makes complete sense to me having these on the inside, but why on earth you would have them on the outside as well, I've got no idea. It just made seeming pretty difficult. So this is what the sort of stitching looks like on the main tiles. I would say that the quality of the workmanship was very, very high, but not masterful. You know, like it's very, very good. Better than I could do for sure with my sewing machine at home, but not like the workmanship on my Cumulus. So at the top you've got a bit of, I believe that's some sort of Dyneema X Grid fabric up there. That's reinforced peak. That works really nicely. You don't have to worry too much about where the pole goes. You've got what are those things called? You've got line locks on all the corners. The rope that it comes with is fantastic. It really grips well in the line locks. I've had bad experiences with them in the past and I wasn't sure whether to trust them, but this rope absolutely jams up. It's also got mid-panel tie-outs that we don't use currently. May cut off, just couldn't have the heart to do it first time. Anything else specific that you want to mention, Finn?
I don't think so. I think you've covered everything pretty well there.
You can see the door sort of here. So, well, we'll get to that later. Oh, and we just realised for size comparison, probably it's good we shove it in the back of a backpack, so it stuffs down pretty teeny. So as you could hopefully have seen then, it pitches really rather easily. There's quite a lot of finesse to the pitching. What would you say the main finesse is to the pitching?
The main finesse is probably trying to get the balance of height of the door in the middle versus like getting the correct width and lowness to the ground. So in the beginning we believed that you could just drop the centre pole and the whole thing would lower really nicely.
Yeah, so originally our plan was that we'd stitch the tent really high with really long guy lines, and then if it started to rain in the night, we'd drop the middle pole by 10 or 15 centimetres, run outside in our raincoats and tighten all the poles.
But we found out pretty quickly in a storm that doing that doesn't really do much, and what you need to do is just pitch or put the stakes in much closer to the tent to drop it lower.
Yeah, so what essentially happens is that when you do this, instead of getting lower to the ground, you get a combination of lower and wider.
Yeah.
And this essentially means that you don't get the same amount lower as you would want to the ground. So if you're going to pitch for a storm, you really need to shorten a lot of the guy lines. So the main guy lines I would recommend to shorten if you're pitching for a storm would be to shorten the back 3 guy lines, so the one at the very back and the 2 next to it. We actually, we normally leave the back one about full length. The next 2 round we shorten to about
2/3 length.
2/3 length, and then the next ones around we shorten to half length, and then we pitch that, and it'll work a lot better for a storm. It tends to make the door, when you do it like this, you bring the door together and higher, so you get a narrower door, and it just brings all the edges lower to the ground. So basically, if you're pitching for a storm, make sure you don't have the nose a bit more sheltered, so you have the door a bit more sheltered and you're pitching into the wind, and B, shorten the guy lines and pitch lower to the ground.
You really have to consider, because you've got this big open door, that there is not going to be the wind blowing into it. Yeah. If the wind blows into this, you will get wet, and you can move it, but we haven't had to do it yet. But just really consider that. You do have, there are more considerations, I would say, with pitching this tarp than there were with pitching my old Six Moon Designs.
Yeah. So we used to have Six Moon Design shelters, and you could basically pitch them any which way, it didn't really matter.
Yeah.
Then I migrated to a DIY version of a mid-tarp, basically, that had full 360-degree protection, and there was definitely more thought that went into site selection. Like, you had to think to yourself, is this site going to be suitable for use with the ground sheet? And for ground sheets, just a reference, we're sitting on it now, we use like 80-gram polycro window film insulation.
Perfectly,
which works really well. But there was a bit more site selection thought with that, but with this, it's the next level. You really have, if there's weather coming, you have to be thinking to yourself, I need to be pitching in a more sheltered spot. Like, you don't want to be pitching on a coal without any wind protection at all. You definitely need to be thinking, where can I pitch so that I can sleep comfortably knowing the wind is not going to blow in that nose. And that's not to say you have to be pitched like that all the time, but if there's weather coming, we do think to ourselves, we need to be pitched in a more sheltered location. So let's talk rain protection. So how many nights of bad weather have we had this through?
I think we've had 2 big bad weathers, like storms, one of which turned into a snowstorm, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then we've had probably 3 or 4 other nights of rain, but I wouldn't describe it as like a storm, just heavy rain.
So regular rain, I would say it handles fantastically. If there's no wind involved, it's just a really massive, huge cavernous space. Like it's actually huge in here.
Being this big is such an advantage if you have to pitch up in the rain, because it gives you the space to put out a ground sheet, cook up inside the tent, do everything you'd normally do, and it's not horrible and claustrophobic.
It's been really, really pleasant for us to... In the past, pitching up in the rain was never any fun. It's actually not that bad with this, because we throw it up, we get in, we sit out the front here, and we have a little cook up out the front, and it's actually not that bad.
We're also having a tarp with 2 people, I would say probably is better than a tent with 2 people, because you kind of have your own personal space within the tarp on your ground sheet, and it stops like each other's gear kind of going into all over the place.
Yeah, I could
and it's nicer to pitch in the rain under a tarp with both of you there being able to listen and talk, rather than pitching at 50 meters away in different tents. So I would say sleeping together in this tarp, I prefer than sleeping separately in tents. I think it's better.
Just a reference. So we both put 16 nights this hike on the tent, and I put another 4 or 5 nights with Rebecca on the southwest coast path. So this is in France at the moment. In the Alps. So storm weather is so. If you don't pitch it too high, and if you pitch it a bit lower down, and you pitch it so that the wind doesn't come in, it's absolutely bomber. Like it really, really is fantastic, like storm protection. I slept very, very well the second storm we had in this tarp.
Really well.
We had a nice sheltered spot.
We did. We knew how to pitch it a bit lower and a bit better at that point.
And it was we rode it out fine. Because it's got such steep side walls, the wind really blows over it. There's not a lot of billowing in. Because it's made of sil nylon, it has a really good stretch to it, and it's really, really strong stuff, so you can really crank it down, and basically that just pulls out all the wrinkles, so you don't get any sort of hums or vibrations.
Yeah, we haven't had any of that really.
It does condensate a lot.
There's a lot of condensation.
On the scale, so we've, like all the tents we've ever slept in condensate a lot.
Yeah.
The nice thing about tarps is you don't have to worry about wiping the condensation up in the morning,
because it's not going to get on your ground sheet.
Fantastic. That said, I really think sil nylon has a tendency to condensate more than other things. So I think in the scale is sil nylon's the most, sil poly's intermediate, Dyneema / Cuban fiber is the least condensation. Obviously all of them still condensate, but sil nylon loves it.
You wake up and the tent's wet even if it hasn't rained.
It also has a bit of a habit of clinging to water. Like a sil poly tent shakes the water. It doesn't get so much heavier, and a Dyneema tent doesn't get so much heavier when it's wet. I feel like sil nylon actually soaks up some of that water, and it probably weighs an extra 100 or 150 grams.
A couple of other things. So when it did snow, it snowed quite a lot, and I would say it didn't handle the snow particularly well.
It is not a 4-season tarp. People love this tarp in Scotland. Like it really, really sheds wind and rain like an absolute beast. If you're pitched in a nice spot, it sheds it like a beast. If you're pitched badly, it's terrible. But that's the same with all tarps. The problem is snow, it does not handle well. Because the sides are so steep, it very, very quickly starts to sag. So that was probably the only time when I really appreciated the extra strength of the fabric, because that night we were up for about an hour and a half, shaking the snow off every 15 minutes, because it was just there was so much snow. Like we had we had a foot of snow in about an hour and a half, and we were constantly shaking the snow off the tarp, because we woke up after about 15 or 20 minutes after it started snowing, I reckon, and Finn was like, "Oh my god, there's someone lying on the tent."
The entire tent was on top of me because it was sagging so much from the snow.
We were almost crushed by the snow, so it does not handle snow loading very well.
But just don't take it somewhere it's going to snow, really. Another thing to be said is, although we've talked a lot about how you can pitch it nice and low in storms, when it's a beautiful sunny day, you can also pitch it so massive and huge that it's like absolutely lovely to be inside.
You can pitch it really high, really, really cavernous space inside.
Particularly if you do the other type of door, which is the flying diamond, where the center pole is on one of these edges here. You get such a huge entrance and general space in there. It's absolutely lovely. So it's particularly large and voluminous as a tarp.
That comes with a drawback though of having a very large footprint, so it does not fit well into tiny little divots. Saying that, it's probably easier to pitch this than it is to find space to pitch both of our old 6 Moon design shelters.
That is definitely true.
Like, finding one good spot is generally easier than finding two good spots. But it does have a big footprint, and it's difficult. You can't really squeeze it between trees in a tight forest.
No.
I wouldn't say it's really a problem. Because it's a tarp, you can pitch over rocks.
Yes,
so,
you've got that flexibility.
If there's a rock or a small shrub or a hole or something, you don't have to worry about it too much. You can just pitch over it and then lie your ground sheet in the good space in the side of it.
Yeah.
So,
what else?
should we summarise?
I think so.
Weather protection, pretty damn fine, really. If you pitch it well and you're in a sheltered spot, it's fantastic.
One thing we haven't discussed actually at all is bugs
Oh,
and
yes,
sleeping
bugs.
in
We
a
actually
tarp
had some
just in
questions about
general, because a couple of people asked questions about that.
So I think the general, well, you summarised it pretty well a minute ago.
Yeah, I think generally where we are camping in the Alps at this time of year, there aren't very many bugs, so it's not a problem and it's fine. Like the occasional slug goes over your quilt, it's not the end of the world, or maybe a few mosquitoes fly around. But I could imagine if there were lots of bugs, it would be absolutely horrendous. So I think it just depends. If you're camping in Scotland and it's going to be really midgy, it's going to be horrible unless you have a bug netting.
I'm going to say it's not the number of bugs, it's the number of biting insects. Because at the end of the day, most insects are not that bad.
Yeah.
Actually, I was woken up last night by a particularly impressive stag beetle that had managed to climb its way on top of my face. It was particularly nasty. But 99% of the time, in the Alps, in the Pyrenees, in the UK, in England, maybe not so much in Scotland, mosquitoes are not a major problem. There basically aren't any mosquitoes. Horseflies are pretty basically non-existent in the Alps, fairly rare in the Pyrenees.
Yeah.
And then like ticks.
Ticks
don't really move around, so
Yeah.
you tend to pick up ticks as you're walking through the brush, not as you're lying in your bed at night. So bugs, touch wood thus far, have always been okay, and I've never had a problem with them.
Yeah, but I could imagine if there were lots of midges, it would be particularly unpleasant. So I think it just depends where you're going and what time of year you're going, really.
So let's summarise. Weight, fantastic. 511 grams
Between
for
two people?
Between two people is an insanely light
Yeah.
shelter. Even for one person, it's a doable weight. I'm not sure if you should be carrying around a 511 gram tarp, but for two people,
I used to carry a 700 gram tent just for myself, so...
yeah, but my mid used to be 360 grams, and you could go lighter. But amazing weight for two people, pretty damn good for one. Very good storm resistance when pitched correctly in the right
Yes.
place, but it's not like a mid in the sense that you could pitch it on the top of a mountain and the wind could come from any direction, it would always be okay. It's great if you pitch it well. It's probably the best you can get. It's better than anything we've ever had if you pitch it well in a good place. Ease of pitching, really, really high. It's actually a very easy tarp to pitch with a lot of
Particularly with two
flexibility.
people as well.
Yeah, it has a lot of flexibility in the different pitches you can do, and you can pitch around a lot of things, so I'd say that's really good. Machining, I would say it's very, very well made. Better than anything I could do.
General space and comfort.
It's huge for two people, definitely not for three. Absolutely gargantuan for one. Cost, I think it was relatively inexpensive. I actually don't remember how much I paid for it. I think it was about £250.
Yeah. Long lead time, though.
Oh my god, yeah. It is a pain. So I think it took almost 16 weeks to get this tarp.
So you really got to know you want it.
16 weeks. Really,
in
you should be
advance.
measuring it in months. It was like a 5-month lead
Yeah.
time. It was crazy. 4 months maybe. But it was a long time to get it. Overall, though, very positive, to be honest. Like, I really like the tarp. I'm really happy with it. I think that it's a great shelter for two people.
It's converted me to tarp life, and I was pretty anti it beforehand, so it must be pretty good.
Yeah. Right. That's it.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching. Check out our other reviews. I think we've got reviews of various other tents. Follow along with the rest of the sort. Watch back the series that we've been through so far. You can see all the things we've put it through. I think the snow video's got a particularly snowy thumbnail. If you want to check that out, and the stormy video.
If you've got any experience with other shelters, tarps, tents, anything, we'd love to hear in the comments. So just let us know.
Yeah.
And if you've got any questions, we'll probably answer them.
Yeah, almost certainly. Right. Thank you very much, and goodbye.